This is Birthing at Home, a podcast. I'm Elsie, your host. I'm a home birth mum of 2 little boys, a doula in Melbourne supporting birth at home. I'm a mental health nurse and the co-creator of Homebirth Victoria. If you want to learn more about me, the podcast, or my work as a doula, check out www.birthingathome.apodcast. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land I'm recording on in Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. I would also like to acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have been birthing at home on country for tens of thousands of years prior to the British invasion and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. This is episode 59, and today Sahara, a midwife and an IBCLC, shares her 3 home birth stories. Sahara shares her journey to finding home birth and choosing to become a midwife. We then hear about her experience in a publicly funded home birth program during the start of COVID-19 here in Melbourne and the challenges she faced. She then shares her 2 home births under the care of private midwives. We go on some interesting tangents in this episode, and we also talk about loss and also the trauma associated with pyloric stenosis surgery that her 3rd baby had to undergo in the early weeks of her life outside the womb. Enjoy. Welcome, Sahara, to Birthing at Home, a podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Hello, thank you. I meant to clarify as well, you're like in the southeast of Melbourne, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah, cool. And I'm in the northern suburbs. So that's awesome. Do you want to begin, Sahara, by giving a little overview to who you are? Obviously, we know where you're located, but who's in your family?
So I am wife to David. I have 3 children, 3 home birth babies. Van is 4.5, Chet is 2.5, and Ren is 7 months old. So 2 boys and a girl. I'm a midwife and a IBCLC, and I also have 1 dog, Ray, and she is almost 10.
Excellent. How does Ray handle the chaos of 3 kids?
We nicknamed her Nana, actually, like of Peter Pan. She's very hovers like a mother, very protective. She's a pointer, so just that's kind of her personality.
Yeah,
but I think she's living with high anxiety most of the time, but she's finding her path through it.
Yeah. We have 2 dogs as well, 2 greyhounds, and Terry, he's 10 as well. And yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, are you guys okay? Because Frankie has no boundaries. Frankie's like pulling her tail, and you could be like, Frankie, stop pulling the dog's tail. It's chaos. And so all 3 of your babies were born at home.
Yep, that's right. Yep. So
Amazing.
I had the first was MGP caseload, and the second 2 were private.
Yeah, cool. All here in Victoria?
Yep, and all the same midwife as well, which is quite special, yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful. So maybe before we get started, or get into the birth stories, so you're a midwife. How long have you been a midwife for?
So I have always been a midwife. When I finished school and went to uni, that's what I've done. That's what I did, and that's what I've didn't forge a career after birth or anything like that, like a lot of people. So that's always been my story. Yeah.
And how did you come across home birth? Like growing up, had you heard of home birth? Do you remember anything about home birth?
Yeah. So actually, I remember being quite young, maybe 7 or 8 or something like that, and we had gone to visit a great aunt and uncle, and I remember I didn't really know much about birth or having children or anything like that, but I remember standing by the fire at their house. They had a really, really old house, and my great aunt said to me, "Oh, I was born where you're standing." And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, all of my siblings and I were."
Wow.
And I was like, "Wow, that's so cool." And she told me about it, and I was like, "Cool." I don't even know if I didn't really know much about wanting kids or anything, but I remember just going, I'm going to have my babies at home. That's cool.
Yeah.
And then I didn't really think much about that experience. And then as I got older and then I stumbled upon midwifery actually in the career advisor's office. I was probably looking at more mental health nursing because my parents are both in mental health. And she just started to talk about nursing and then things you can do after nursing. And she mentioned midwifery and I was like, oh, what's that again? And she said, and I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I think I'll like that. So I chose it and then obviously getting into midwifery and uni and placements was a bit of a shock from what I thought it was
it's not as simple as just birthing near the fireplace.
And I had like researched a little more about midwifery before actually committing to it with uni, but I was like, okay, this is a bit more, I guess, broken and different to what I thought.
A polite way to put it,
But I had this gorgeous lecturer and, you know, when you look back on those people that have probably been a really big impact on your life, but you don't really realise until much later. And I'm going to probably say she is the reason that I have ended up becoming the midwife or working in the spaces that I'm working in now, and probably the reason I had 3 home births.
Wow.
So she was previously a home birth midwife and she was a lactation consultant as well and everything. And I just remember her stories, and one in particular just springs to my mind was about this birth she was at, and the woman was on the ground just moaning through her contractions, just doing her thing, and her other 2 kids or 3 kids, I can't remember, were just sitting on the ground and on the bed eating spaghetti bolognese. And I was like, I just remember that story. It's always stuck with me. And I thought, not only was that what I wanted to do, like with my own children, I was like, I think I want to work in that space too, you know?
Yeah.
So fast forward, I did uni, I did some work obviously in the hospital and stuff, and then I ended up working on an MGP program that did home birth.
Yeah.
And then I fell pregnant with my first, and I was like, cool, I'm just going to have him through the program I work on.
Yeah.
I had kind of mentioned it to my husband in the past that we would have a baby at home, but you know what husbands are like. I don't know if he was ever actually listening to me or
yeah.
Because then when I got pregnant and said, all right, I'm having the baby at home, he was like, wait, what? I have said this before.
Yeah. Do you know if he had ever heard of home birth or had any ideas about it?
Not before. Obviously, I worked in the space, so he knew.
Yeah.
But no, never before. Probably didn't even know what a midwife was before I said I'm going to do midwifery, because we've been together for 15 years. So
yeah, cool.
He was with me the whole time. I was at uni and everything as well. But yeah, there was a little bit of he made a comment like, oh, you know, don't people birth in hospital for a reason? It's safer, just the same comment that you always hear. And I was like, dude, I work in this space and you see me and he's like, but I guess it's different than when that's work and then this is your own.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just said to him, well, look, whatever you want to do is fine, but I'm having the baby at home. It would be fabulous if you're there, but if you're not as well.
Oh, that's so good.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And then he just said, oh, yeah, that's fine, of course. Of course I'll be there. And he just said, look, at the end of the day, you know best because it is your area. You wouldn't come tell me how to, fix something or do something. So he's I trust that is you're choosing it for whatever reason you're choosing it. Yeah. Even though I swear when I would get home from work and he would ask me how my day was and I would offload, clearly he never listened because they are all the reasons why.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
So, yeah, that was that. We actually didn't fall under the radius to have Van through the MGP program. So I actually was a bit cheeky and booked him with my mum's address.
Oh, yeah, nice.
She lives 5
Hot
minutes
tip,
from
everybody. Yeah.
I think a lot of people do it. We had people renting houses just to have the home birth through the program.
Yeah. Well, I've seen like people, because the Royal Women's, I think, is 20 minutes. And I've seen people say that they live like 5 minutes outside of like that 20 minutes thing. And that's crazy because every other program is like 30 minutes.
Yeah,
but the women's,
and it's strict, because I worked there. Like, you think you'd get perks, but no, like I spoke to a few people before and they're like, they won't, it's 30 minutes, it's strict. So I live 5 minutes from mum. She was 30, so but yeah, it's the MGP hospital birth program is fabulous. Like, it just opens that door for people, especially who cannot afford the service, and it's an amazing, and we need more of them. So I booked in. I remembered doing a home visit a bit earlier on in my caseload, days before I fell pregnant, and I went to this woman's house and she was telling me about she had gone in for her second baby, and it was a breech, but undiagnosed breech. Okay. And she was telling me she was like fully and about to have this baby, and, you know, there was talk about like a Caesar, all the rest of it. And she was like, my midwife just advocated for me. Like, she advocated, and she had, you know, a vaginal breech. And I remember hearing the story and I was like, that's who I want as my midwife. And that's who I chose.
So good. Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
I worked with her. She is an incredible midwife. Very experienced, she's just amazing. So I chose her, and I was very lucky, though. I had a very great selection of midwives to choose from. So it was a little bit hard.
Yeah.
And the pregnancy was pretty just whatever, like nothing too exciting. I had to do the GTT, being in the
program. So true.
Which was horrible. I definitely did not do it the next 2 times.
Yeah.
And probably everything was pretty smooth sailing, and I never, look, if I'm honest with you, I had moments of doubt or where I would perhaps question the process, just because I had been exposed to so much in the hospital.
Yeah.
For so many years. I must admit, though, I've got a pretty good, strong red thread, as you'd say. All the women in my family have had great birth experiences, and I feel like the few that didn't, or they may have had 1 or 2 births that didn't go to plan, it wasn't talked about, or they kind of just more kept to the positive. And I just kind of, even growing up, always, my mum had 3 really beautiful births in a kind of birth center setting, and I just grew up knowing that, well, you just have a baby. I always remember my mum when I was little going, it hurt and it was hard, but, you know, you just do it. So I always just had this. It wasn't actually till I started working in the hospital that I was like, people have issues and there's trouble. And but obviously I learnt a lot about the cascade of intervention and how much those problems usually arise from the hospital setting. For me, home birth just my want for home birth just grew even more. Like I was like, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. But how amazing that you already had these stories, because so many women, and I mean even men out there, like they don't hear like how they were born or that birth is positive or negative. So I think there's this mystery about what actually happens,
and it's fine to have the negative, but also relaying the story with the knowledge of perhaps how it got to that point.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it is. Yeah. But I don't know, a lot of people around me just seem to know, bless her. Like, I remember my cousin speaking to me before I had my first, just bless her, because I was like, I do know this, like, but she's just telling me her story. She goes, whatever you do, don't have the epidural. And I went, oh, okay. I said, I'm having a home birth anyway. And she goes, she goes, oh, she's gone, I had it with my first, and they told me it wasn't the reason, but I don't believe them that it's the reason I had the forceps, because the second time, because I said to them, why can't I push this baby out? It must be that thing that's giving me no feeling. And she said, they said it wasn't, but I don't believe it.
Yeah.
And she said the second time I didn't have it and I pushed fine. And it's funny because a lot of stories I hear are things like, oh, thank God I had the epidural because I needed a forceps. And it's just this kind of, these narratives and this language. And, it really can like freak people out and make them doubt their body before they're even pregnant.
And I guess it's quite disappointing that as a generalization that cascade isn't explained or seemingly debriefed. It's not like, oh, well, you had to have an emergency C-section or whatever. So next time, we should be careful of this. But I don't think anybody's saying, oh, you had to have an emergency C-section this time, so maybe we should consider not inducing you.
And even
or like work backwards.
Yeah. Even when it is debriefed properly, I'm like, you're talking to a woman laying in bed who's perhaps lost like 1 to 2 liters of blood.
Yeah.
I mean, I had really great births, and even after I was like, and I'm like, they're not taking anything in. Like,
no, it's not the right time.
They've been up for days. They're highly they've perhaps had huge blood losses. They're so sore, and it's like, they're not really going to take everything in. Yeah. So,
and you're so in my experience, because with my first son Murphy, I had a home birth with him, but I didn't really properly reflect on that experience until I was pregnant with Frankie, and then I was like, wait a second, maybe that wasn't as positive as I initially, there were things that I could have been changed about that situation. And that was, 3 years later.
Also, is it that response of that's how you get through it and cope?
Yeah.
That kind of, what is it suppressing the real feelings and emotions and just going, I've got to survive the postpartum period, so I'm just gonna roll with that was good.
Yeah, but I think I can understand why people say that they've had thank goodness births or whatever, because I think my initial mindset was oh, thank goodness the midwives were there, or thank goodness whatever. But actually, when you look back and when I look through all of the steps before that, I was like, wait a second, there are things that I could have changed about that situation. I mean, you can't change it in hindsight, but one of my favorites is, oh, thank goodness I was in hospital and had the CTG because the baby's heart rate dropped. Yeah.
And I'm like,
I hate CTGs.
What were they doing before it dropped, or where were you at the point in the
Yeah.
labour. Like, there's so many questions to that comment. There's so many
Yes.
questions I have.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
let's
yeah.
unpack this. Like, you
Yeah.
don't, but that's, and I'm like, oh, you're going around telling people who haven't had babies this
Yes.
story. And it's
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, so yeah, there's just, yeah, and it is that when you do have a home birth, there are so many shocked faces about, oh, what if something goes wrong? And
Yeah.
yeah, and I guess that's probably, yeah, my biggest thing is just, yeah, how do we normalize and how do we bring back like the, yeah, to
Yeah.
home birth, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like we just went on a bit of a tangent there.
Sorry.
But anyway, one of the questions that I had, so in, you know, being a midwife and working in this space and having all the knowledge that you do and did you or your partner, like, did you do any like particular education or anything like that?
So I did hypnobirthing. I actually just did online. So Van was born June 2020.
Yeah.
So that was probably the biggest thing that happened in my pregnancy was COVID.
Yeah.
And I feel like you had your first around the same time, didn't you?
In April, yeah.
So it was just really that whole two of not knowing, like even for us, COVID, we didn't, like it was scary at first, yeah? Like we were like, what is this? It wasn't till later, you know, it's a touchy subject anyway for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But at first we were like, what is this? And there was so much fear mongering and and it was scary. Like,
yeah, totally. Yeah.
You know, especially being pregnant around that time. So that was probably the biggest thing. So I did hypnobirthing, but it was online because you couldn't do face-to-face anyway. Yeah. I actually just did it on my own, not with my husband.
Yeah.
And I was pretty clear with him about just what I think, like what I've seen in labour, what he could do, what I might need, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So leading up to his birth, there was a lot of talk about cancelling the home birth program. A lot of talk about no water birth, all this sort of stuff. And that was probably my biggest fear in pregnancy, was that they were going to cancel the program on me. I had two lovely midwives who I used to work with who also owned they did private practice. And I kind of set up a bit of a safety net with them that if the program would get pulled, they would just take me on. So I felt like the world had been lifted off my shoulders when I organised that kind of just, you know, it was very like unofficial, like they were just literally going to take me. So it was just, that was a big relief for me to have that set up because for me, having a home birth was just the most important thing. So leading
especially at that time because like the hospitals were full of sick people.
Yeah. But you know what? I didn't even stem so much from that. I just always like, I just want to have a home birth. That was that was what I wanted, and it's all I had in my vision. So it would often. Yeah, so going back to before, like I'd have the odd little doubt pop in my head just because obviously I know a lot, like I've seen a lot. I was pretty good at just pushing that aside and going, no, just like it's fine. I did everything that you do. I did acupuncture, I did chiro, I did everything. The dates, everything. And I went into labour at 39 and 1. I remember I woke up that morning. It was the morning before was a Saturday morning, and I had a really funny feeling in my tummy. And looking back, I've had that same feeling before each baby.
Wow, yeah.
And it's like I knew, but I didn't, like I just went, no, like I knew though, you know, looking back, we're like, oh, I knew I was having a baby. I knew that they were coming. And my husband actually said, he actually went out that day, just not far, which was great. He just had to get his computer fixed at a friend's or something. I can't remember what it was. I just spent the whole day just nesting, just cleaning, and I remember cleaning the chalk pen. I was splitting wood. I was doing
Jesus.
I was having little cramps, but I was like, it's probably, nothing. You can pre-labor for days, which, or like it can start and stop and start and stop, which is really not true for a primip anyway, generally, but that's what I kept telling myself. Yeah. And then I remember in the my bowels were opening a lot in the day, and I was like, it's nothing. And then I had a big bloody show, and I was like, you can lose your plug like a week, 2 weeks before.
Yeah.
I just pushed it all aside and just kept carrying on in the day, and having some rest here and there, and just doing my thing, really, kind of a lot of nesting. And then that night, at about 9, we had dinner. I will tell I'll tell this because there's a theme to this. Yeah. We had Lebanese, or Middle Eastern. Yeah. And then my husband was kind of just, I said to him, we might meet the baby tonight. And he's like, really? I hadn't said anything before this. And I was like, yeah, but I said, maybe not, but I said, maybe. And he's like, he's like, well, what, that whole, what do you want me to do? Like, and straight away I was like, I want you to go away. Yeah. So I said, why don't you get some sleep? And so he went to bed. And then I was just really listening to some hypnobirthing tracks, and then my birth playlist. And I was like, this is a bit like nothing's really happening. So I went to bed. Yeah. And then at 5 to 1 in the morning, I woke up to this almighty contraction, and it was on from there.
Wow.
And I just kind of did my own thing, like with the TENS machine, having showers, and just moving around the house. And it got to, so the labour for Van, the active labour, was I think 4.5 hours.
Wow, yeah.
So from 5 to 1. And then it got to a point I was like, no, I can't. Like, this is a lot. And I woke my husband up and I said, we have to go. And I remember it was a really cold winter night. Yeah. And I was in like my little bralette and underwear set, and I was like, let's go, like, get the stuff, we're going to mum's. And he's like, it's raining and freezing outside. It would have been like 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning or something. He's like, you're going to put something on? And I'm like, I was so hot. I was like, get in the car. And I experienced that. Now, it was quite interesting going from here to mum's, and then my contractions did go.
Yeah, fascinating. So had you set up like an extra space at your mum's as well?
So I had the whole birth space set up at mum's, and she has like a 2.5 person spa bath. So it was always just I'm at a birth in there. I did always tell my dad that we put a liner and stuff in it, which was a lie.
Oh, that's so funny.
And I actually said to him the other day, did you think I was serious when I said I was birthing at your house? He said, I thought it was a joke at the start, but then we kind of kept talking about it, and I was like, oh, okay, apparently this actually is
This is happening.
I was like, were you weirded out? He's like, oh, I don't know, you guys do lots of stuff. And I'm like, well.
Thanks, Dad.
So anyway, I called my mum, and yeah, bless her soul, she got up and put the light, the porch light on, and we come in, and it had all died off, but then I think it didn't take long, it kicked back up because I was in another safe environment that was a home to me, but it did make me go think about those women, that do drive in and then come into the hospital where it's not safe, and just how much that does impact labour. Yeah. So I was just, once things picked up again there, I was like, okay, this is a lot. I did the classic midwife thing and tried to VE myself.
I think it's a rite of passage at this point.
And I was like, I thought I was only about 2 or 3 or something. I don't know what I was feeling, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm going to have to go in. I'm going to need the epidural. Like, I can't do this. And my husband was like, you need to call the midwife. And so I eventually called and they came. And I had in my birth plan, of course, no VEs, the whole let's not talk about dilatation, just that whole I laugh now because and then she come in and I was like, you need to be ED. But we spoke about this and I was like, do it.
Yeah.
So she did. I laid on the bed and she did, and she said something about 6 to 7 centimeters, and I was like, no. I was like, I can't. She said, no. She said, it's very, very stretchy, and it's very, like she said 6 to 7, but it's really, and she, and I went, all I could hear was 6, and I was like, I can't.
The power, right? Yeah.
And I was like, no, like I can't. And I just jumped up, and then I shrommed, and I just did this almighty groan, and then literally it was like fill the bath, and like I think 20 minutes later I had the baby.
Wow. Yeah.
So another, and it's funny, that's just another thing is like I know VEs mean nothing, and I know, what she was trying to tell me, like 6 to 7, but stretchy, bulging membranes, like head is down, like all I could hear was that number. And it's so crazy just how much impact that can have, and it's so inaccurate. So I got in the bath, and second stage was very quick and very intense. I do remember I got a bit freaked out during that because I just thought it just felt so intense and so powerful, and I was like, surely this is not right. Like something must be wrong because I just wasn't expecting that intense. Even though I'd seen it, I just was like, wow, is this really what it is? Because it was a lot. And then I birthed my son at, I'm just trying to think, actually it's behind me.
That's beautiful pictures.
5:38 in the morning.
Wow, yeah.
And we didn't know we were having a boy, so, and quite typical, like 10 to 15 minutes later, someone was like, what is it? And we're like, we don't even care. Like it could be anything. We do not care. And it was really lovely. It was, so it was, and it was that whole typical story of like hovering above your body. Like that's honestly what that birth was like for me. Like out of body experience. It was beautiful. So we then brought him home and just did the.
When did you? So what was the placenta birth like?
So I actually snapped his cord.
Oh. That's happened for a few people actually. That's funny.
But it was fine. Like, so minimal blood loss. But then I snapped the cord, and that made quite a bit more. But then birthed the placenta fine. It was all physiological third stage. So no.
How did the cord snap? Was it like that you?
I think it was probably, he had quite a small placenta and quite a skinny little cord anyway, and I probably just pulled a bit too hard, like a bit, and it just snapped. But thank God it snapped like right in the kind of perfect spot. Like it wasn't too close to the umbi. It wasn't like inside. So we were still able to clamp it and it was all fine.
Cool.
And
interesting.
Third stage was just relatively normal time frame and everything intact, and it was really nice.
And then how long before you jumped in the car to go back?
So actually my husband went home and went to sleep, and I laid in the spare room at Mum's, which used to be my bedroom actually, and I slept as well.
Yeah.
Not going to say I had a very great sleep though, because you're just so of course. The adrenaline and everything. So I think that he came back and got us in the afternoon and we went home. Yeah. And then, just relaxed and stayed in bed for what felt weeks, to be honest. It was really nice. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think that's really funny though that, to get into the free program, you had to go to Mum's. So you still had that transfer, transfer sort of experience of going from one place to another, and then also after.
Yeah.
How amazing that you were able to have that space, that familiar space that you
to just
were
go back
able to already set up and everything,
And it's another place that I feel safe and felt like home. So for me, labour just kicked back off.
Yeah.
But I can see how, even I'm sure, you're in active labour. I was definitely in active labour. So going to the hospital, it would have started again eventually, but to what capacity and to what you just see how that intervention can really just happen there.
Well, even having to think about getting in the car and being in the car, the logistics of being in labour in the car, cars aren't set up.
It was horrible. It was horrible. Yeah, it was so uncomfortable. I do remember that. It was so uncomfortable, and I was like, "Ugh, I could never do that again."
Yeah. So you have then, and then because with Chet and Ren, did you go through the program, or the program's
so it's not happening anymore
at the moment?
I do believe it's starting again soon for our hospital, but it's not at the moment. So that midwife, actually, Van was kind of one of her births, and she had already started her business, started the logistics of it.
Cool.
And I did know she was leaving after, a little bit after his birth. Her plan was to leave. So it's funny, actually, because, I remember too when I was organising the safety net midwives and telling my husband, okay, so I've organised this, and if the hospital falls through, it's going to cost us this much. And he was like, what? Oh. And I was like, but, and he's like, oh, and he didn't get it. He didn't understand the value.
Yeah.
But it was another one of those things where I was like, this is what I'm doing. And we're paying for it, whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
But then after I had Van and he found out our midwife was leaving, his first comment when she was here postnatally was, oh, so I guess we have to go private next time.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, because for him, that continuity of care, and, he loves home birth, and he was the biggest skeptic before. Even when I spoke about having the safety net midwives, I was like, oh, they might come to our house. Oh, we'll have him at our house if that happens. And he's like, oh, I'd rather still just do it at your mum's because of, all the mess and he just had this idea, especially from what friends had told him, that birth was horrific, that there's blood splurting everywhere, and there's I think that's the biggest thing for him after Van's was, oh wow, it's actually really, there's barely any blood. It's actually really clean, nice, and I just think he didn't know what to expect having a baby as well, and he had heard bad stories from friends, and he just really had no idea what was coming, which is quite typical. So
of course,
with the second, we always knew we'd have another home birth, and he was pretty keen to actually have the next one at our own home. And it all worked out anyway because we had to go private. Because that continuity was so important for him. Private, of course, has its amazing perks as well, especially with a toddler, having all your appointments at home and not having to. It was okay with the first because I didn't have a toddler in tow, but I can imagine doing it through the MGP program would have been that little bit less comfortable.
Yeah.
But you do save a lot of money, but private, you know, it's long appointments. They're very personal. There's just so many things. There's not as many rules and regulations. Like I remember with Van, I was so stressed about going post dates, and I was like to the backup midwives, if I go post dates, can you do me my birth, because I won't be able to do the home birth, or if my GTT is abnormal, can I come to you? Or it's just so many things that, you know, you have to consider, where with private you can relax and you're you know, I don't even like saying post dates because it's not like, you know, like so many women go. Like, what's a due date? So it's just that relaxing with the private, like, I'm going to have my home birth no matter what. So I fell pregnant and trigger warning, miscarriage. I actually lost that baby. So that baby would have been due in January of 2022. And it was a bit of a tough time, actually, because my husband's brother had been diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer, and we kind of got 3 months with him, and that was it. So I lost the baby at the start, and it's crazy. You don't know. You kind of underestimate the impact that will even have on your partner, because you think it's just something that happens to you and your body. But yeah, he was pretty upset by that. And I think just my mind just went, all right, I just have to fix this, and I have to bring happiness, and I just have to bring some kind of positivity to our life, because we've just lost this baby, and we're dealing with my brother-in-law. And so my go-to kind of thing was just fix it. So I just got pregnant straight away, and I completely suppressed that loss and did not deal with that. I put it nice and tightly in a box and put it away, and I got pregnant straight away.
Had you told your midwife that you were going to have that you'd had this loss?
Yeah, because
when it was happening?
I always tell her literally when I find out I'm pregnant, because she books out so quick. And I lost the baby, I think, at about 8 weeks or something. So that was fine. I got pregnant with Chet, like literally I didn't even have a period. I got pregnant with him in the next cycle after the loss. It was a pretty straightforward miscarriage. I didn't need any I didn't need a DNC or anything like that. I just had the scan, got told, because I was spotting, and I went in, and I just knew too. When I was spotting, it's like I knew. You know, all those, you know, but when you look back, you're like, you're in denial at the time. I came home after that, and that weekend I just passed the baby myself. Like, I think I just needed to hear that, like, it's gone. So that was fine. I got pregnant straight away, but also not fine. I really should have let my body rest because I was highly anemic. So I felt horrible. I ended up getting an iron infusion at I think 20 weeks. I felt so rubbish, that like just tired that whole start of pregnancy. And that was another straightforward pregnancy. We did know what we were having though, because we let my brother-in-law read, like we ticked for the gender so that he could let us know before he passed away.
Geez, that almost made me cry.
Yeah,
it was beautiful.
Yeah, it was a really special moment. He passed away 2 days after he told us what we were having.
Sahara, oh my gosh.
It was
so special.
It was really tough. So with that pregnancy, it was all very straightforward. I decided with that home birth that I would invite my mother-in-law. I thought that it might be really healing and nice for her after that loss. And my mother-in-law's got 5 boys. So I knew, like, you only ever have your mum if you're having anyone, So I was like, she's never been to anyone else's births and she's never going to get the opportunity. So I had her. I told her early on, and I also had a photographer this time.
Cool.
And I had the same midwives and my mum. All organised.
With I think with Van, was your mum and dad present?
My dad was in bed.
Okay.
But the baby crying woke him up, and he did come and see me in the bath. And that's when he realised too there was no liner in the bath.
So good. And your mother-in-law, all of her babies had been born in a hospital?
It wasn't a hospital, actually.
Birth centre.
So, you would know because you're from Melbourne, but do you know Peter Mac?
Yeah.
So that used to be a birth kind of.
Yeah.
And all her babies were born there, and it's actually quite thing. That's when my brother-in-law ended up passing away. So he went back to where he was born.
Whoa, oh my gosh, that's which so is, freaky.
Yeah, pretty crazy story. Yeah.
Wow.
So she had all normal births. I actually didn't tell them I was having a home birth with my first. Just because I only really told my parents and, people at work knew, obviously. And it was just something I just didn't want any kind of negative input. And my father-in-law is an ex-AMBO, so I didn't know whether he was going to have an opinion or –
Totally,
I just decided to keep that space safe. But as soon as he was born, and of course my husband was calling people and – they were like, let us know when you're home from hospital. And he's like, well, we actually had it at home. And the first thing they were like was like, oh, no, like, is everyone okay? And I remember his brother, when he's like, we actually planned it. And his brother's like, oh, like, is that safe? And he's like, well, they're not just 2 randoms off the street, Like, and he's telling them, like, they've got equipment and, like, of course it's safe. It's like, oh, okay. So with my second, I didn't really need to talk about home birth. Everyone just said, are you having another home birth? Yeah, so my second son is just suits his personality so well. He decided to come at 41 weeks.
Okay.
Which for me, after having a 39-weeker, was pretty horrible.
Yeah, pretty unfair. Yeah.
I was doing everything, and I remember leading up to the labour, I was every night doing like lunges and everything. Like, just get out.
Yeah.
So he came. One morning I woke up, I was doing all these lunges and these like induction like workouts and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to wake up in labour just like I did with Van. And I remember waking up at about 5 a.m. and going to the toilet and looking at the clock, and I was like, I'm still pregnant. And I was so upset. And I walked past the birth ball, booted it and just burst into tears. And then I went back to bed, and then my husband and I woke up in the morning. I got up and he was making coffee, and I had that same funny feeling in my tummy. So this would have been about probably 7-ish or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I just said, I don't know if you'll be going to work. And he was like, are you in labour? And I'm like, no, but I don't know,
I don't know, Yeah.
And he's like, you should call the midwife, because she was always like, call me straight away, because Van was, relatively quick
for
a first baby.
Totally.
And I was like, I just don't know. And I called her and I said, look, I'm not in labour, but I just have a funny feeling. And I think by the time she did get, that's right. And then she said, I'll have breakfast and I'll make my way over. If you're not in labour, no big deal. We'll just have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
And while she was, I guess, making her way here is when it kicked off. And I just remember it started like with an almighty contraction that I was hanging off the fridge door. Swearing, and I'm quite a swearer in labour.
Excellent.
Then it was, everyone kind of made their way here. It was so different to Van's. So Chet was born at 9:45 in the morning.
Oh my gosh, that's so quick.
Yeah, so it was a couple of hours. I do remember when everyone started to come, though, like the contractions would become very irregular, like, and it was such a beautiful birth. It was so I had the photographer, and she was just the most perfect, like, vibe for the space. She's just a beautiful soul. And my mum, my mother-in-law, my 2 midwives, and my husband and my son.
Beautiful.
And like, I had made all these cheese and fruit platters before everyone got there, and I'd set everything up, and my son was just sitting eating his porridge, and there was just light coming in from every window, and I was just in the pool, and it was just everyone was kind of just chitter-chattering, and it was that real, like, village, women coming together. I was literally just birthing in the corner, and they were having cups of tea and eating cheese and crackers, and my son was running over, like, with his little doctor's kit, taking with his stethoscope, and obsessed with the duck. They loved those duck thermometers.
Yeah, the thermometers.
Yeah, and then it was kind of, I don't know, just the same sort of thing. Second stage was very intense and horrible, but quite so I think Van's second stage maybe was about like 18 or 17 minutes. I think Chet's was about 10.
Yeah, wow.
And he was born at 9:45 in the morning, so everyone still got to go on their lunch dates and
perfect.
Whatever else they had planned for the day. His was amazing because I'd honestly had this full night's sleep. Like, I just felt, it was, it was good. So,
had you done any preparation with Van, like in being present at the birth?
He was 22 months, so he didn't really get what was going on, if that makes sense. I did more with my daughter because he was that bit older.
Yeah.
It's really funny. You'd be surprised how much kids read a room. And he was fine. And he had you do need those people there though if the child needs to be removed but he was fine. He just would come over, and I just feel like I birthed very differently to being knowing he was there. Like, I wasn't I was more present, where with Van I felt like it was like I was in another world. Like I said to you, I felt like I was out of my body, but with Chet I was very present. Like, I would come in and out. I do reckon his labour would have been quicker if there weren't, which is, it's fine. It was still, but I do think having all those people around and just that environment. But because I think I held him in for quite a while too. Like, my midwife, when she said, before I got in the pool, she was watching me, and she said, I feel like he was like you were, because you were holding yourself and like clenching. And so I did hold off second stage for quite a while with him. But motherhood, though, 1 to 2 is a big shock. I don't know if that was the same for you, but
it is now. I think initially I was like, this is okay, but now it just feels I'm always tired. I just feel like a lot of my a lot of triggers come up for me having a second, and a lot of, that's when I really had to do a lot of work on myself and probably unpack the miscarriage and all of that stuff. So that was an interesting first year for me. Was the placenta with Chet all right?
Yep, same thing. Physiological third stage,
Yeah.
everything intact.
Cool.
So another minimal blood loss, just
Yeah.
another really positive home birth story.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I also think I saw on your Instagram, do you do birth trauma debriefs or birth
Yeah,
trauma?
yeah, I do. So I started my business just before I had my daughter.
Yeah.
So I've obviously I'm on maternity leave now, but definitely, when I go back around when she's around 1,
Yeah.
I'm keen to get everything going back again.
Yeah.
And hopefully work more in the home birth space next year. I just did my
Yeah.
endorsement and have a
Brilliant.
few things
Congrats.
planned for the future. But yeah,
Yeah.
and
Do you
I'm not sure
find
what's happening
like,
with the program at work and all that stuff.
yeah, look, I've tried to follow it up for Home Birth Victoria and they don't want to have a
Yeah.
chat. So I don't know what's really happening. I think people have said like January next year, but like,
Yeah,
is that
I
when they're
have heard
taking
that
women, or
too.
is that when the births are happening? Like, what's
Yeah,
happening? Because they were meant to do it this year, so I don't know. What I
yeah.
wanted to ask is if in your experience, debriefing with women, like with losses, do you find that lots of women do push the loss down, and like does that inevitably always have like an impact with their birth if they've had birth trauma? Does that, I don't know if that question makes sense, but I guess in the
Um,
terms of storytelling, like, telling a birth story, whether it's positive or negative or dramatic or just an everyday kind of thing, is like way more common, I feel, than storytelling around loss. Like, do you feel that inability to talk about loss and things like that has an impact on the birth experience?
I think it might come down to how good at suppressing things you are.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know, like, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like, we've all, I don't know. That's a hard one. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Because I'm doing my I'm doing some training with Rhea Dempsey at the moment,
Oh,
and
amazing.
she quite often has told us stories that, when she's been at births and sometimes when things are struggling to move or like keep moving or something comes up, that, she's kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
then had to like dive in and be like,
Yeah.
look at things that have happened before in that moment. I guess.
No, I understand what you're saying now. I do understand what you're saying now. And yeah, I do agree with that. It's the same as well. Like, I do believe that things even like that can inhibit labor even beginning, or how it progresses even in the early days. But in talking things like even commencing labor, like, it's amazing how much our mind, even subconscious thoughts, are connected to everything hormonal, and letting go and surrendering. Definitely, I agree with that. I remember hearing a story about someone too who had recently like lost, I think she lost her mum, or I can't remember who it was, and she was having a home birth and had to transfer just because it was just not really progressing and not moving anywhere, and it was just all of that grief and not having done that work.
I wonder what the correlation is between like loss and grief and transfers, home birth transfers, or just in general birth trauma.
I
wonder
definitely
what the correlation is.
Yeah, definitely. Birth trauma too, 100%. Because if you think about our ability. So that kind of fight, flight, freeze response, we have the ability to stop our labor. No matter, just like I was talking about when I went in the car and then getting to my mum's house and women go. So if we have a danger approaching us and we can stop labor that's like near an end, that is such an incredible innate ability that we have. So if we've got subconscious fears and triggers from previous birth trauma coming up in that birth space, I 100% it would. And
interesting.
Yeah, it would be interesting to. There's a PhD there.
And then show the government. And I mean, it's not like, well, I mean, the government's listened to us on this professional indemnity insurance thing, at least the low risk terminology, so maybe they would listen. I don't know. You never know.
But it's hard too, because you've got to talk about like unpacking that stuff in pregnancy too is not appropriate for some people, time appropriate or anything, and or they might have another little one and it's just they're not in a place to do that. So do some women just go on a loop of birth trauma to birth trauma to birth trauma to birth trauma because they're carrying that previous experience from the first, and does that affect the second and third and fourth and fifth? I think for a lot, that it would happen a lot. But it's just, I guess, working that out would be hard, but I do believe, because our mind, it's powerful.
I think I've seen or read stuff about like the intergenerational impact of that stuff as well, and like if things, I mean, because I've been doing my presentation for the Home Birth Australia conference and talking about storytelling, like I do, and you talk about the red thread and whatnot, I do feel that, again, I don't think there's really any research, or if you could even research something, that like the intergenerational impact of unresolved birth trauma or unresolved things around like fertility or your perception of birth or pregnancy, like how that filters through your line, like just lots of, I think it's very powerful, all of this sort of subconscious stuff that you don't really even realize has potentially an impact, because I guess we're so reactive and we acknowledge what we see, but we don't really like in society it's not really spoken about the unseen. I mean, and that's like with mental health as well, right? Like if you see somebody with a broken leg, you're like, oh, yesterday was I working in mental health, I took a consumer out to play basketball, and we were looking for a car park, and we have like the cars have like disability parking things, and I was like, oh, we can park in the disability car parking thing. And so we did, and then I was like, to anybody else looking at this, it would just look like two regular people stepping out of the car, but like that's not actually the situation. Underneath there's like all of this stuff that you don't see. And I feel like in the maternity world it's all about like what's on the GTT test, or what do you see from the CTG, or what do you see from this, but underneath there's actually so much stuff that you can't really like put a metric on or measure, or
even if they have never birthed before, even what is their red thread, what have they heard from their mum and their mother-in-law and their sister and just that impact that we can have on our children now, even as mums, like my sons and my daughter, their birth story will potentially
filter through,
and potentially impact how their children are born. So it's big, and it's bigger than people realize. It starts before we realize, and
Yeah. 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 Well, even like when you think about that experience when you were 7 years old, like just hearing that home
Yeah.
birth was this chill, beautiful thing, like
Mm,
it doesn't have to be like how so many other stories you hear are, especially as a young woman.
yeah.
I realize we've gone like on another huge tangent here.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like Saturday morning. I don't know. So with Chet, you had the same midwife, and then for Ren, you were able to have the same
Same
midwife
again.
again.
Same
That's
again. Yeah.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So same thing. I literally pee on a stick.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I've told her, not the first time, but with Chet and Ren, I'm pretty sure she knew before my husband that I was pregnant.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I tell her relatively quick just to get in,
Yeah.
because she books out quite quickly.
Yeah.
So my husband and I had a lot of chats before we decided to go for a third, just because two was a lot, and you do, as I said, I feel like I had to go through a lot of changes, and I changed a lot after having a second, and I had to do a lot of work on myself.
Yeah.
And started therapy, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. 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 Amazing.
The whole reparenting journey that is still ongoing.
Totally. Yeah.
And we decided to go again, and we decided with Ren we would find out what we were having again, just because we actually really enjoyed that with Chet.
Yeah.
And so we let Van pop a balloon. It was just us here with my parents and my husband's mum. I think his dad was away or something at that time, and found out we were having a girl, which was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So Ren's pregnancy, again, quite uncomplicated, like nothing to tell. Chet's, as I said, that was hard with a toddler, as I'm sure you can relate. Ren's was really hard. I think every pregnancy like Chet's and then Ren's, things just start earlier.
Yeah.
And I actually felt like my body was possibly going to break when I was pregnant with her. I think for me it was probably 3 back-to-back pregnancies. I've breastfed since then. Like, I haven't stopped. I've tandem fed twice. I've literally been breastfeeding for 4.5 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've been pregnant 3 times in 4.5 years. Like, I think my body was just like, whoa.
Yeah.
So hers was definitely my hardest pregnancy, but not by means of complications, just because I think it was just that strain on myself. Not giving myself that grace and break.
Yeah.
So she had the exact same due date as Chet, actually.
Whoa.
Oh, I forgot to tell here, actually, with Chet, the night of before he went into labour, we had Lebanese that night as well.
Oh,
that was a part of the story at the start.
Yeah.
So the boys were both born on the 14th as well. The 14th of June and the 14th of April.
Oh my gosh! Oh, but that's so funny because Frankie is born on the 14th of June.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, really cute.
Yeah, my youngest. Yeah. Oh, that's so funny.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Yeah. So our little Geminis.
What? Oh, that's so funny. But 2 14s, that's crazy.
Yeah. So Chet's due date was the 7th of the 4th, and Ren's was the 7th of the 4th as well.
Yeah.
That was a bit of an accident in terms of, like, I would have preferred a bit more of but then I was like, whatever. Even if they're born on the same day, I actually kind of wanted them to be, because I was like, that'd be pretty cool. Yeah. I thought,
it might be cool for us.
the likelihood that I'm going to have 3 on the 14th is low.
Yeah.
So hers was just hard on my body, and then I got sick at the end of pregnancy. My husband and I did. I'm not sure what it was. I think it was some kind of adenovirus or something.
Oh.
Yeah, it was really horrible. very like fluey and then just diarrhea, vomiting.
Oh, that's awful.
Was sick for a good couple of weeks actually, and I was
Wow.
just so petrified, like I was going to go into labor, and I was just like diarrhea all the time. We were so unwell. Like my mum she took time off work and took the boys. Like I've never been so sick in my life, the both of us, but the boys didn't get it, interestingly.
Thank goodness.
And so that was what the end of my pregnancy was like, just that. And, you know, she's the first one I actually packed a proper hospital bag for. And I don't know, I just had this feeling about a hospital, and I don't know if it was because I was so sick. I don't know what it was. But anyway, I started to get good just a few days before she was born. I even had to cancel I think a couple appointments with my midwife, so I hadn't seen her in a little bit.
Yeah.
But you know, I was feeling fine. Like looking back, there's probably some times of reduced movement there.
Yeah.
But I think because I lost a lot of weight as well.
Holy
but I think
moly.
I think I just felt like it was okay because she's okay. And then at 39 and 2, so the 2nd of the 4th, 24, which actually adds up to 14.
Yeah, what?
Cute. That's when she was born. So that morning I woke up and I was just so over pregnancy. I was just so tired from being so sick.
Yeah.
And I woke up that morning and the boys were just, you know, just being boys, and I remember I couldn't be bothered that morning, and I put something on for them and I hopped in the shower and I just burst into tears, and I had that feeling in my tummy again, you know, but I ignored it again, third time round. And I called my mum. I got out the shower and I was just crying. I was like, I'm just not loving life today.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, well, Dad and I actually just randomly have the day off, so why don't you come around? And I was like, yes, please. So I went around and she just looked at me, and I think she just knew as well. And she said, look, go home, rest, and I'll look after the boys today. So I went home and I nested. I had a stack of bills to pay. I cleaned the house. I just did all that sort of stuff, and I didn't rest. And then I went back to get the boys, and she said, have you rested? And I said, no. And she said, well, I'll give them dinner and bath them and bring them home. Just go home and rest, right? Yeah. So I went home, and then my husband got home, and I was just relaxing and talking, and I said to him, oh, I've just got a weird feeling, you know, that something's going on. And he's like, oh, like you can have the baby. But especially multi, like with Chet and Ren, I had prodromal labor like so much, like for weeks, Like with Chet it was from 35 weeks, and I didn't have him till 41. And And Ren was the same. I'd had, you know, you as a multi, you cramp for weeks. So I was I don't know, like what's going on. And I think I lost my plug with her that day too from memory. I never lost it with Chet. I don't think it came out in the pool, but I think something like that. And I just felt like, there was a bit of mucousy show, that's right. And I just thought, but I don't know, I'm a multi, so who knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And then my husband come in, he was working in the shed, and we were just chatting, and then I just said, maybe just set the pool up because I don't know. And then he's like, oh, okay. And I remember he was setting it up, and I got this contraction, and I was like hanging off the door, just like screaming.
Wow.
And then I think I called my midwife, and she was like, I'm going to come right now. And I'm like, okay, like, but I was still okay. So I think I called her about, I think maybe around 5:45 or something like that. And then called the photographer, the same one, and we were going to have my mother-in-law again, but we didn't call her yet. And honestly, from then on, it just I remember. Yeah, I don't even remember much. It was just,
Wow.
I think it was like 50 minutes or something for
Holy
my
moly.
daughter. It was, everyone kind of got there just like, the photographer missed it. She got there after.
Yep.
The second midwife got there 10 minutes before, and my midwife got there about, I think 15 minutes or something like that. And it was very intense. It was actually like, it was too quick.
Yeah.
And she was probably my lesson as a midwife, because I remember people would talk to me about their fast labor or things like that, and I'd always be like, "Oh, you're so lucky!" And it wasn't actually nice.
Yeah.
I was in so much shock after. I couldn't string a sentence together. Like, I'm normally very happy and bubbly after my births, but I was like disassociating from everything and everyone. And I don't think I was caring for my daughter for like 2 days, but I wasn't connected with her, and I didn't even really accept that I'd had a baby. And it wasn't until I think about 2 days later, I was like, oh my God, I had a baby. I was just this blank, it was horrible. It was quite full on. Like, my husband even said it was quite traumatic. I remember the second midwife said that she was really overwhelmed and really so that she was a bit of a lesson for me in terms of how birth trauma can look. We always think it's just comes down to, these really traumatic high intervention births, but I had a really beautiful home birth, and it was still a beautiful birth, but it was a bit of a shock for me. Yeah.
But it's like, there's been quite a few women that have shared their quick stories on the podcast, and pretty much that's the main theme, is that they were shocked and it actually wasn't that pleasant. Because your body is going through like the most intense thing that it will ever go through, and also sped up so quickly that it makes sense that your body's just like, what the hell?
Yeah. So we called my mum I don't know, maybe she got here 10 minutes before as well with the boys. So the boys were here as well. So another, and it is a little bit more special too than, like the chat was special, but Van still talks about it now. And
so much older.
We read a home birth book, leading up, we'd read it a lot, and and he loves telling the story, and so there was still beautiful aspects, and the photographer got really gorgeous photos all after the birth and all that sort of stuff. The second stage, I don't even think she had a time for it. That one was like real, like fetal ejection reflex. Like the just
your body's just doing it.
I couldn't.
No control.
There was no breathing. There was I remember just trying to hold her head, like I'm trying to just breathe, but she's just coming. So same thing, really. Just physiological third stage, everything intact, minimal blood loss, just another positive home birth story.
Did it take longer, for the placenta to be born, or roughly similar time?
I think they were all pretty similar. Yeah. I'm probably not the greatest with third stage, because I just can't be bothered. I hate it. I'm like, I'm just So I'm probably not the greatest at it.
But that's amazing. Did you so it took you a few days to sort of come round to the fact that Ren was here you'd done it, it was over.
Yeah.
Has that come up for you, like, any other time in the past few months? Like,
Yeah. I did for quite a, and I still do feel a bit robbed because, my other two birthing experiences were that feeling of the high and the just, that feeling that's better than anything you've ever felt before.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that with her. I was just flat the whole time. And you do feel a bit robbed because she is my last baby and that is my last experience.
Yeah.
And it was so different to the boys. So yes, I got a beautiful home birth and everything perfect, but the feelings were very different. And so I did feel, and I still do feel a little bit robbed, but I'm making peace with it more.
Yeah.
But it's still, it is still there for me a little bit. Yeah. So she's just been everything with her has been a bit different. It's really funny too because I kept having these negative thoughts when I was pregnant with her about because I've just let the system get in my head a little bit. So it was that third wild card narrative. I don't know if you've heard that, but it's something that goes around and it's so ridiculous and so stupid. But I did always think, oh God, what if that does happen to me? But it's interesting when you think about sayings and narratives like that. Do we make them something? Yeah. But it was all perfect and everything. Yeah. But she actually we had RSV when she was 2 weeks old.
Oh no.
Yeah, so we were a bit sick for a couple of weeks, and around the time that we had the RSV and she developed a cough, she actually started vomiting. And I kind of thought it was all connected for a while there, and I was probably missing a lot of her fatigue, her lethargy, because the boys were so busy anyway, when she was about 5 weeks old, her cough started to go, and so I know she had RSV because I took her to the hospital a week before, and we actually they did the swab, and I said, okay. I took her because she seemed dehydrated to me.
Yeah.
She had laboured breathing at times, but it was nothing that I felt I couldn't manage. And then I was like, oh, you're very dehydrated and very lethargic, and she hadn't fed all day. So I took her in and they swabbed and said she's got RSV, and I said, okay, that makes sense. And then I kind of talked about the vomiting, and they're like, oh, yeah, like I said, it's usually with coughs and coughing, and they're like, it can happen. It's not common, but it can, so it must, And we went home. They did try and cannulate her, to give her fluids, and we went home. They failed, but that kind of cortisol woke her up and she breastfed. So we went home, and a week later, she just wasn't coughing anymore and she was still vomiting, and it was projectile. And I was like, something's going on. And I was just thinking back to what I know, and I had this thought about something, and I was like, oh, surely not. Because then I was Googling it, the condition, and I don't know if you've heard of pyloric stenosis. It's when the pylorus after birth, it can thicken too much. It's quite
What's
rare.
The pylorus, sorry?
So it connects the upper and lower GI tract. It's a tube, so your food passes down it, and the wall can thicken too much. It thickens and thickens until all the milk just pools on top, and they projectile vomit it out.
Oh, interesting.
But 80% of cases are boys, and usually it's your firstborn, and there's usually family risk factors. And, the only risk factor she had was that she's Caucasian.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it won't be that because it's not common anywhere. And I'm like, I just know too much and I'm being paranoid. And anyway, I ended up taking her back to the hospital at 5 weeks. And it was. So she had to have abdominal surgery, at
Oh
5
my
weeks of
goodness.
age. Yeah, so
Oh,
that
Baba.
that was
Whoa.
it was pretty horrendous. And like I had to fast her for 3 days before because her sodium levels and all that was so out of whack. So if she had a GA, she,
Oh,
could have.
Sahara, that sounds so difficult. Oh my
Yeah, so
goodness.
we had to get her levels all back to normal before we could give her surgery,
Yeah.
because she could have had a bratty or something, having
Yeah, of
such out of
course.
whack
Yeah,
levels.
yeah.
So that was just, such a traumatic experience for me. Like
100%. Yeah.
I'm such like I'm just so I'm quite holistic with things. Like I don't even give my kids Panadol very really.
Yeah.
And I'm all about skin to skin breastfeeding, like
Yeah.
resting after a baby, being together. And then I end up like, I had to watch them try and do like 7 attempts of an IV. And I said to my husband, like, for 3 days, because she's just crying and because she was hungry. Yeah. And I said to my husband, I know that my head is telling me this, she needs surgery or she will die, but my body is telling me to take my baby and run away from this place, like run far away. So it was, but she had the surgery and it was all successful. I just cringed looking at the medication chart and everything she was given. But we got home, and I think it took me a long time to get out of that shock. Like I was in shock from the birth, and then we had the RSV, and then I was just, that really shook me, that hospital experience.
Yeah.
And, there's actually I can't describe the pain it feels to have someone take your 5-week-old baby that's awake. They won't even let you sit while they go into GA, take her away awake, and you just have to, hand her over. And it was a lot. Like the whole experience was a lot. And I just got home and I just definitely like went into a shell for a while there. And so her whole postpartum experience for me from the birth has really just, it's been very different to the boys. And I do feel robbed of a lot of it. But I think, for me, it's just been coming out of the shell and making peace with everything. And
probably, like, maybe is there also an element of, like, trying to forgive yourself? Like, even, like, I feel, at least with, I mean, it's not as intense as that, but, like, Frankie has all these allergies, and I'm like, is it something that I did? Is it something that I should have been eating, that I shouldn't have been eating? Should I have done this? Should I have done that? Like, should I have started this earlier? Should I have, like, the should have, could have kind of thing? I mean, for the what was it called?
Pyloric stenosis.
Pyloric stenosis, that you're not in control of that, but I feel
and it's so rare, and it's a birth defect that doesn't appear till 3 to 6 weeks after, so you don't know about it in pregnancy.
So
they don't know what causes it, and statistically speaking, she fell into such a small window of having it, like being a girl, and it's not common anyway, and no risk factors other than Caucasian, but I couldn't have done anything different. The only regret I kind of had was by the time I got to hospital, she was so unwell that we had to fast for 3 days, and that was traumatic.
Totally,
and she was so dehydrated that her veins, the anaesthetist was the one who took 7 attempts with an ultrasound machine. And on the 7th, he did say, I'm probably going to have to knock her out after this. Just that whole, I was so glad my husband was there. There was a nurse holding her down, and my husband and I were holding her down like a 5-week-old baby.
Baba, yeah.
And her trauma response, just watching her she would just scream and scream and scream, and no one would do anything, and then she would just look blankly and then just pass out. And she'd just do it over and over and over again. And so that whole experience, I did kind of have regret, like if I had have got her to hospital sooner. But in saying that, I took her a week before and they did her bloods and they were normal. So I think with pyloric stenosis, there's a small window. Even the first ultrasound guy, he missed the pyloric stenosis and they redid it in the morning with someone more experienced, and he found it. So, because it's all about measuring the wall. So I honestly don't think I could have done anything different, you know, in terms of all of that. You know, the RSV, I don't know. I think I got it from the fruit and veg shop on the Sunday. So
how do you know that? Yeah, like it's...
Yeah. And I can't, you know, I don't think that there's nothing I could have done really about any of it. I did keep having these like weird feelings. So like when she was in surgery, you know, because I know, you know, what can happen with GA and all that sort of stuff, I did have these feelings like, oh my God, if she dies under GA, I had actually tried to have a girl, so I did the whole timing method.
Wow.
And I was having these like thoughts like, have I played with fate? Like, have I, like, it is, the mind does start to, you do have really intrusive thoughts. No one talks to you about them. And then you become a mum and they're so intense. And, yeah, but she had the surgery and she healed well and everything was all good. I did a lot of like in the postnatal period, I've listened to her feelings lots and just really held her and listened to her, which has been really healing, I think.
Beautiful,
you know, because even I at the start would have a lot of cries with her, and I feel like, you know, I felt like we were communicating the story. She's had a little bit of Reiki done.
Beautiful.
And I think the most important thing I can do for her is I've written the story out, and I will just always let her know what happened. And and I think now too her children will be, I think, at a 20% risk of having it.
Wow. Yeah.
I think it worked out to 1 in 5. That's 20, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
I think so. Yeah. So it's just that for her, knowledge will be power, and but it was just her whole postnatal period for me was just so I feel like now it's just that kind of, I feel like we've done a lot of healing, but I'm sure there's still a lot, and there's still a lot sitting there for me.
I think like with, especially in the context of home birth and birth in general, like we try to like make things predictable, and you know, for some there's, you know, that makes them more scared or worried, and so, you know, they try to prevent things from happening, but like at the end of the day, things are always going to happen, and that's life. You're not in control of almost everything. Like there's only so many things that you can control, and
I think this is really funny too, people's perception of home birth. Like I remember after all this happened, I can't remember where I was, someone said to me like, maybe they'd heard, or maybe I told them what had happened, I can't remember, and their response was, so you went to all that effort and spent all that money and went to all that effort to have a home birth and you know, not give her any medications or anything, and then she needed it all anyway. And it's like, are you missing the point about like, this has got and this is what I mean. Like I think this is what like society, like what kind of people we're dealing with, like they don't even understand like why, you know, you would have a home birth, and would it have been better if I had her in hospital and stayed there for 5 weeks for when she needed surgery? Like it's not connected at all, but it's this just
Yeah.
So
But
bizarre.
I think it reminds me, in one of the earlier episodes, I recorded a story with a mum that had to have an emergency C-section at like 32 weeks or something. And she went on to have a home birth after cesarean, and talking to her about like, at 32 weeks, what can you do? Like, you're not going to be having a home birth at 32 weeks, but that doesn't mean if you get to term and everything's fine, like, why can't you have a home birth just because you've had this experience? It doesn't mean like every baby and every journey is individual, and like, you just have to, I feel like roll with the punches. I don't know, like,
Home birth isn't just for the baby, it's for the
No.
mum as well. Like our health and morbidity means something as well. It's
it's so much bigger than the black and whiteness of, is home birth risky or is it safe? Like, it's so much bigger than that. But I feel like we could talk for a very long time. Thank you so much for sharing your amazing stories, including your postpartum story. Did you have anything? Yeah, of course. Did you have anything that you wanted to add that we missed, or anything else you wanted to say?
I don't think so. Oh, I don't think I told you. So I also had Lebanese the night before.
So this is the hot tip from this episode.
It's the hot tip, guys.
Yeah. Lebanese food. Add that to, the dates and the Indian food.
It's just a freak chance, but my husband thinks he is 100% like that is it. I'm like, okay, mate.
Is it from the same Lebanese place?
No, it wasn't. No.
I was going to say, you could have like told them that they could put that as like a little...
I think I had like a chicken kebab each time though.
Oh, perfect. That's useful information to know.
But no, like, so I guess just thanks for listening, and it's great. I think it's important to get as many positive stories out there, and and I do just, like, for us, like, feel very lucky, and I think it's amazing we've had the same midwife for all 3 births. 3 really positive home birth experiences.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.